Thank you everyone for your attendance and for the staff that have put in the efforts to give us the documentation, and to those that are going to sit through and support the conversation today as well. We'll hand over to Alison and Craig. Thank you.
Good morning. So we're starting off with the introduction to the financial strategy, which is on screen, and hopefully the technology behaves itself. So just by way of an introduction, in summary, the financial strategy outlines how Council will make decisions, how we look at our income and expenditure, the borrowing and investments, and how we ultimately balance the financials and taking into account the implication to ratepayers over the 10-year period. There's a number of key objectives that we've got on screen there on the financial strategy, which is ensuring that we're providing funding for continuing growth and the transformation of the district, ensuring we keep rates at levels that allow for work on our essential infrastructure and community facilities, and also just addressing our borrowing requirements and what do we need to enable us to do that. But like I said before, ultimately making sure we keep ourselves in good financial health, not just now, but for future generations. I've just put a footnote in there as well, just allowing for where we are in the debt position, that I will be ensuring as part of the team structure that across this we are allowing for that transparency, timeliness of management and council financial reporting, which covers the performance, treasury debt management, information on DCs, and also the other key balance sheet movements. Now that will take the form of a dashboard approach, which we did cover off a wee bit in last week's Finance Performance Committee. So, how do we go about starting this? So our starting point is always looking at our current financial position. Where are we just now? What's the population growth, and what do we need in terms of future infrastructure requirements? So that's all the information that the rest of the business pulls together around the projects that they want to be working on. It includes both CapEx and operating cost base. We also need to consider our inflation, how projects are funded, whether that's loans, whether it's directly through rates, whether it's development contributions, and also any projects are carried over from previous financial years. We'll come onto that bit in a wee bit more detail later. I think also worth noting what is not included within these financials. So we've had our first workshop on the strategic investment strategy, and noting again that it's too early to capture any financial benefits within this long-term plan, but they will be included within the next annual plan. And I think going back to a slide that we presented back in January, there's also a number of revenue opportunities that we've outlined. Again, these are not captured, but noting once we get someone in place, an owner will be assigned to each of those, and tracking and progress will be reported back through the Finance and Performance Committee meetings. Okay, so now we move into our capital investment and what our borrowing looks like. So there's a chart on the left there. We've got 4 lines on there. So starting off with the blue line, that is our rates revenue. So you can see that increasing over the duration. Now that covers current population and our projected growth as well. The orange line, which is our capital expenditure, so that starts off quite high because we do have our carryover position in there. We've got a little bit of peaks and troughs based on how the project is, or programme should I say, is phased just now. I think the key things in here is your top 2 lines from a borrowing standpoint. So the black line is our debt limit. We amended that from 160% up to 220% as part of our Treasury policy that was adopted or approved through, I think, Audit and Risk late last year. But noting this is well below the LGFA guidelines of 280%. On the grey line, which just sits below it, the gaps there is where ultimately we're sitting between our debt limit. So you can see sort of at the middle there, and this is where the project is phased, where we're right at the top, and at one part we are breaching that by 3%. But the positive thing to see is that grey line is trending off over the end of the long-term plan period. If we just look at the key points alongside, so I've sort of covered our debt limit, and it's just worth noting the main areas of our capital spend is within roading and water. The year 4 spend, where it does go to the 223%, we do have quite a few big projects within that year. We could look at phasing those. I've just noted in there as well that the spend across the reserves over that 10-year period is 87 million. There is a little bit of catch-up spend that we've covered previously when we've talked to legacy issues. But I think the key thing to note here is our overall capital programme, including the carryovers, is 1.5 billion. That is a lot based on what we have delivered in the past. Now, that does include a carryover position at 118 million. Just on the carry forwards, so that's overall organisational carryover position. 70 of that was noted previously for being capital within infrastructure and property. That has now increased a little bit, and the balance sits as projects, wider projects across the organisation. I think I've spoken quite a lot that we have got some legacy issues in here. Projects have been rolled over for a number of years. Between myself and Tim Mason and the wider team, we will be looking through how we simplify that information, share what's sitting within there, and ultimately look at what projects do we need to retain in that space and what do we need to continue with. And actually then how do we phase that back through? In all likelihood, we will do that by means of a staff submission back into the consultation process, which allows us to rephase that back in. Just a quick sort of summary on where we're at with development contributions. So the chart there, this was previously, I think, presented back through the Tim Mason's committee about a month ago. So that's just summarises what we, as at June 2023, what our balances were. And within the long-term plan that we've got, we have forecasted development contributions at the level of 293 million. We will do some additional work in there in just presenting that based on how we've got the table on the left, and we can submit that back to you at a later date. So what this slide is showing is our debt levels and how that's split across our key activity areas. So you can see in the top two lines, which is our roading and our water. So the bulk of the debt and borrowing that we are going into is to fund those key areas. The blue line that sits quite a bit below that is our community facilities. And you can see the others, they barely sort of hit the chart a little bit. So the key thing there is debt that we are proposing to take on is to cover roading and water. So, I mean, where does this all sit and impact on ratepayers? So we previously presented some information to you on what those numbers look like. The numbers have moved a little bit, and I think we've also noted as well some of the challenges we've had with the Magic module. We've had to do a lot of work in there, making sure that the module was working as it was intended. We have uncovered some legacy things in there. So unfortunately, these numbers have changed, not materially, but they have changed, particularly in years 2 and 3. Our overall 10-year average, which I think in our last presentation was 8.4, is now sitting at 8.5. The phasing, so there's two key areas in that chart. The orange bars represents percentage increase per year, and the blue line that goes across it is the average cost to each individual ratepayer. I think going back to what I talked about just in the capital programme, where we do look at, and if we do look at the phasing, that will address some of the, if we look at 2031, 32, where that number is quite low, we will be looking to address that through the staff submission and how we phase those capital programmes, one from an affordability standpoint, and secondly around what we can deliver. The next two slides are just where do we sit in comparison. So this is year 1 of the long-term plan, and this is a sample from 48 other councils. Sorry, this is quite small on screen, but where we are sitting is the average in there is 15.3. So our year 1 average is ballpark in line with the other 48 councils. The highest in there is 24%, and the lowest is down at 6%. I think where we've got 6% numbers, these are areas where a lot of the capital works have just been moved down the track a little bit. And the second slide there is year 2 of the long-term plan, and that's a sample from 38. Now, this is where we are higher, and this is where I think we need to be rephasing some of our capital programme. So we're still sitting at 14.6, with the average there being 8. And that's all of the slides. So happy to pause there and take any questions.
Thank you. Just on that slide that you're showing with regards to 26 to 35, most of our projects that we have forecast in our draft LTP will all converge in 2026. Will all be proposed to start in 2026. So my question is, how realistic is that when we get to 2026, we will actually have a decrease in rates as shown on that graph when we've got increasing costs happening daily with our existing capital projects?
Okay, so the capital programme, based on its current phasing, does include cost escalation. So we've got inflation aspects built into that. The year 2 drop-off is really a byproduct of how we've captured the carry-forward programme just now. So that is largely in year 1 and sort of phased a little bit into years 2. And I think, like I said, this is one area where we need to just cover that phasing, but we would do that by virtue of a staff submission.
Just looking at that graph on the screen there now, I think probably Malcolm and Deborah and myself, that graph might look very familiar, but it was supposed to be tailing off now. And so I guess that gives us a taste of the expenditure we're facing, our inability to control our costs. And I guess with all due respect, I doubt we're going to see that actually occur. And it's challenging, particularly when you see, I think it's on page 10, the forecast rates rises, and that's down at 2 and 4%, which brings the overall down to 8.5%. That's not credible. It won't happen. And look, I have to be blunt, and I think I've been asking for a long time. I don't believe, I'm not going to be here this afternoon because I'm attending a funeral, but if I was, I wouldn't be voting for the release of the LTP in this current form. I don't think we've done enough to actually trim costs. You know, I regard it as management's role to bring us cost-cutting options for us to decide what could and shouldn't go into the LTP, not wait to the submission process. It's untenable that our ratepayers will be able to go through our accounts and submit to us here, there, or everywhere where a logical cut would be. The best place to cut costs is people who know the accounts, know we're in our business. And really, my perception of us as a council is we like to think we're robust and very strong, but I think we're at a crisis point where we as governors have to step back in a macro position and actually have a real good look at this, because you know our gross debt position, we've got 53 million of DCs in our balance sheet, which has to be spent. So you're going to add another 53 million of debt onto our debt position straight away. You've got a whole lot of reserves there, which actually will be spent over time, which will come off our debt, or some will come from revenue. We've got an extreme capital works program, which I think was something like 900 items, which we've got to get in front of us and do the hard work. And, you know, I'll hold my hand up. There's a couple who were sitting in bed last night thinking, well, where could I save money? Well, the immediate option to me is, first thing I would do is stop the undergrounding fund, put all that cash into the business. While we continue to underground power lines, I wouldn't do that anymore. Second thing is, in my back patch, we got Perryman's Road, it's going to be closed. Why would we seal it? There's only one car going to go down it. You know, so there's a lot of places where we as a team could go through line by line by line in our CapEx program and say, let's have a fundamental reset here, chuck everything off and start again, because we're going to have a bit of bloodletting here, because we've got some dirty laundry we've got to air around our holiday pay and some other things that need tidying up. If you're going to have a bloodletting session, why not get out there and get it all cleaned up in one go and start afresh? Particularly, my perception is that the discretionary funds, they're nice to have, but they don't stop, or they're largely for high school kids to go to touch tournaments and things like that. They'll still go. They're not reliant on us doing it. It's just a nice place of funding. I'd 86 the discretionary funds as well. Let's get a bit ruthless about this. We're in a position where we've got to drive costs down. Our ratepayers and the groups that I mingle with particularly are extremely concerned about the position here. And there seems to be a perception that the camel's back will never break. But, you know, if I give you an example of a irrigated farm, and we'll talk about urban people as well, but an irrigated farm on CPW, for instance, when it was dry, it was paying about $12,000 to $14,000 a year in rates. The fact that a turnout arrived on the boundary and they were able to irrigate it and generate more income, that drove the rating valuation up. That's fair enough. So, but that's now 57,000. And under our proposed rates increases here of another 40% odd, in 3 years' time, they'll be paying 82,000 in rates. So every day you walk out the door and start your business life, you're going, well, I've got to pay Selwyn District Council about $1,300 this week before I start doing anything. Those sort of costs are not sustainable in the long term, and you know it just doesn't work. And the same thing is happening with our urban population. You look at Rollston here, and everyone who goes to the supermarket and sits down and talks to people for a minute will hear the same conversation. New houses, Ford Ranger up the drive with a Toyota Corolla beside it, everything looks sweet. But underneath there, the legs are going frantically just to maintain that veneer of actually things are going okay. So my perception is that we need to do some hard yards here and start really to take some of these capital projects off the list. You know, and even again in my back patch, the Lincoln Town Centre Master Project was such a good project. Why haven't we done it 5 years ago? Pains me to say that, but probably there's somewhere within that project, there's a more manageable outcome, a more staged outcome, which delivers the large portions of what we seek, but not at the cost of 46 million. So that's me. I wouldn't be voting for the LTP this afternoon for a number of reasons, including the lack of audit. I'm not here, so I can't vote in absentia, but I am advocating most strongly that we do some hard yards on this.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Grant. Look, I think it would be fair to say, as a team, we've been quite upfront around the makeup of this LTP in terms of, again, not going to apologise for using the word legacy issues, but also in terms of perhaps some of the ratings levels previously have actually not kept a pace. So what we're seeing for this LTP is a consequence of many years worth of rates perhaps not being set at an appropriate level. What we're seeing is some inflationary pressures here. Included in what has been put forward is that there has been cost reductions at a staffing level, and that piece of work has been undertaken. And I think I shared that with you as councillors right at the start. We're also really clear too that in terms of the capital programme, whilst will have maybe 1% of impact into the rates, maybe 2 at best, it's not necessarily the capital programme that is one of the main drivers of our position. So, and there's I think the team have explained over a number of meetings that a number of the items in the capital programme, and I'll use Lincoln Town Centre, there is some connectivity into funding from central government. So if we stop, say, the Lincoln programme, then we also lose government funding, and that would provide a significant challenge. I'm really proud of the work that the team have done in terms of collating, for the want of a better word, all of the capital projects. We've had some upfront discussions, and to be fair, there has not been one central point where we've had all of the capital programme, and that's recently been pulled together, and that's been quite a significant undertaking. And what the team are saying is that between now and the finalisation of the LTP, we can see that there is some opportunity now that we've done the hard yards to collate all of those projects, to have those exact conversations and and we see that there are some opportunities there. And I think through the infrastructure committee meeting and some workshops in between, those opportunities will be presented and brought forward. I don't disagree with you, Grant. There's a number of projects that have been sitting on the list for 8 to 10 years that have continually been carried forward, and one has to ask the question why. So we will undertake those hard yards. Councillors will be involved in those discussions, and it may well be that we will have done that before we get to the final LTP position, and that may provide an opportunity to make some changes to the infrastructure. So we're saying that will occur.
Thanks, Sharon.
First, I would like to say that I appreciate all the work that the finance team has done to get this up under some very challenging conditions. I just feel looking forward at the current financing forecast. I have some pretty grave concerns about our financial position and our debt levels. And when we talk about council being in a good financial position, is pushing the borrowing limits above our debt limit a good financial decision? And in my mind, it's a no. So we need to do some work on what is in front of us here. There's no fat in that. There's no contingency. And so I guess that's not a good financial position for me to be in, for us. And I agree. Your comments, Sharon, is that there's some work to do in this time that we have until the adoption of an LTP around these carry forward projects and our capital project list. And if that's slash and burn, then that's what it is for our ratepayers. A lot of them are actually doing it quite tough. And if you go out and talk to people in our rural sector, they are scrambling to find ways to intensify their operation to hold on to their farms. So I'll finish, but yeah, that's where I stand on this. I'm not comfortable with where we sit.
Can I say something?
Yeah. Sure.
Before I say, do you want to say something, Alison, before I get going?
No, I was just going to add, and thanks, Lydia. And I think we have sort of noted that we will look at some of the phasing. So the one point that you made around the breaching that debt level, we will be looking to phase that so it stays within.
And I think what's really important here is to remind that what we're talking about is going out with a draft for consultation to hear from our community. So please don't lose sight. This isn't the final document. This isn't our final position. And what I'm particularly proud of as a new CE is that what we've got here is this is what our position is. We know there's the opportunity to do some additional work, and that work will be undertaken between now and the LTP. But don't lose sight of the fact that this is the draft to go out to our community, and I've got no doubt that we will get feedback from our community, but this is not council's final position. And of course, that provides the opportunity that may alter. What we also have to consider, and I hope I'm not going to speak out of turn here, but we are also a significant growth council. And we have to balance also enabling the growth. And I think I've used the term before that we have to continue to be enabling because, and I'll use your terminology, Lydia, slash and burn, is that there is also, a challenge for the Selwyn district that if we send indications that we are closed for business, that will also have detrimental effects into our district too. So we have to find the balance about preparing for the growth, because if we also kick things down the road, what we're going to find is that the growth will continue, and we're seeing that those numbers are going beyond the trajectory anyway, that we're going to find ourselves in a very challenging position of actually not being able to keep a pace, and that will give us then a whole different set of challenges. And noting that what we're addressing here is some of the legacy challenges. If we don't address these, and I get that the numbers in front of you aren't palatable, then all we're simply doing is deferring the problem, which will end up getting bigger in outgoing years.
Thanks, Sharon. And I think there's and Grant, you raised this graph that's in front of us at the moment. It looks very similar to the graphs that have been presented over the last decade to us in every long-term plan we go through it, and it does taper off at the end. But then the new council gets elected and we run through a long-term plan and we add in more projects, and that just shifts the curve out another 3 years, and then we shift the curve out another 3 years, and then we shift the curve out another 3 years because of decisions that we make around this table based on the feedback that we get from our community through this process all the time. The big difference here is that we've lifted that black line because that was 160. So this graph would look quite different around that debt if the number was 160 still. It would be a lot lower than it is. But that's at 220. We could have lifted that to 280. We didn't think that was a good decision as a council. We wanted staff to work to a 220% debt limit, which means that there is room should something unexpected and unfortunate happen to us to think about what other borrowing might needs to be. The crossing that line is sort of getting to the point where we're saying we're not comfortable with where that's at. Don't go to the. We don't want to be at 230. We don't want to be at 240. We don't want to be at 250. Even though the LGFA would be fine with that. Even though the borrowing that wouldn't change this, we're saying that's not where we want to be as a council. So there is room still for unexpected things to be covered. We just don't want to plan for that because that's not what we would expect. The planning we've done is saying between 220 and 280 is still ours to use should we need it. Alison, did you want to say something else? Yeah. Phil.
Sharon, you might want to turn your microphone on. I imagine you're going to be jumping in again shortly. Legacy challenges, grandfathering, past promises, add-on projects. I'm a new councillor here, and I've come into an environment where we're talking about this stuff here, and this is just another skeleton that's in the closet. The fact that there's this work plan that's out there that was something that we just cannot do. And Grant, you said that we're about to break the camel's back. I can tell you exactly when we break the camel's back, because I can tell you the date that that our net borrowing is above our borrowing limit happens when the grey line overtakes it, and that's sometime in 2028. So the back is ready to break. Now, it's our job as councillors to fix this, because this is a skeleton in our closet. This is something that we need to have the work projects here, and we need to do exactly what Grant's saying. We need to do, not because these are things that we want to do, it's because we've got no choice. And I take on board what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, about increasing our. We know we're near the LGFA debt limit, but we have increased by 60% to add almost 50% to what our lending criteria is. So we have increased that. So to make our graph look bad, and we're going to break in 2028. We're lucky we've got 4 years that we can do it. We're lucky that later this year, from what Sharon was saying, and thank you very much for doing this, by the way, because this is great to see that where we're going to break, because now we can go through and we can say, what can't we do? What are we not going to do? How do we cut our cloth? That's why these terms exist. How do we cut our cloth differently? How do we prioritise our work plans? They're not words that I've just made up. These are things that people do all the time. The capital, we're not alone. All over the country, Sam, I think I heard you say the other day that water and roading is being the thing that is killing the country. The cost of water and roading. And we're the same. If water and roading is the thing that's costing us money, the thing that we have to do, then we've got to start looking at things like our community services, and that's the thing about where we're going to cut the cloth. How are we going to prioritise our workload? Over to you, Sharon.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know me well, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Look, Sam covered off around every 3 years elections, new councillors adding on. You can see that we are endeavouring to move towards strategic frameworks and being very intentional in decision making that is intergenerational, with a desire that the frameworks and the decision making frameworks that we provide for council enable that intergenerational thinking so that we move to a position where we're not making knee-jerk and ad hoc decision making, because that's one of the key challenges, I think, for councils around the country, is that it's very easy to make ad hoc and knee-jerk. So what we're trying to do is create that environment based off good strategy and good foundations to enable council to make some really good, strong decisions going forward, whether it's in terms of CapEx, whether it's in terms of the services that's provided. What I would also say is not to lose sight of the feedback that you've already had from the community in terms of the pre-engagement. And, some really key and clear messages have come from the community that in terms of what they wanted to see. And so some of that is around, and I will put in that it is related to community services. So we have a community that's about the average age of 35. So we have a young community, and they want to have the ability to live, play and work in our district. And that's really important to them. And if we want to continue to support our community's desires, remember, this is a consultation document. It is going out for the large proportion of the community to give feedback. I'm fairly certain that the community will give some feedback as to what, the things that they want councillors to focus on. But I'll take you back to the pre-engagement survey, to hearing what our community said and about that ability to live, work and play, and to have those available to them. So it's very easy to come in and say, well, we're going to get rid of all community services, etc. Well, actually, a lot of the community services are focused around our families and our young people. And so it's about finding the balance as to what is the message that we're sending our community. But without a doubt, I'm fairly certain that our community will give us good feedback as part of the consultation process.
Thanks, Sharon. I think another thing about this graph, when I look at it, is the debt, and you've raised how quickly that rises, Phil. In COVID year, we had a 1.7% rates increase. And that was council before this one. We had another couple of lifts that were less than 6. And then last year, all of us who were here now were the council that decided that 6 was the right number, even though many of us were saying it should be 8 to 10 because we knew that inflation was running at least to 10. But we liked 6 because it was just an easier number to sell to the community. And we didn't do the work to say, well, how is this less than 12? How is this less than 10? And that's our council. So it's not just legacy, it's actually current for us to think about. Because if that number had been 10 or 11 instead of 6, next year's number would be 10, not 15. And so the decisions we make this year affect what the rates number will be next year and the year after. And the low rate in COVID year, we thought that was really the right thing to do for the community. And in that year and in that moment, that was the right thing, to make that call. But we're having to now make decisions based on some previous ones that were less than, if we had the time over again and thinking further into the future and not being caught in the moment of the pressure of today, we might have thought slightly differently. So I agree with you, Phil, about that grey line. It's stuck up quickly, but it's because we haven't kept rates high enough to not allow us to have to borrow all that money to do that. So we've gone with an easy conversation with the community around 6, rather than the hard conversation about these are all the things you're asking us for. If you want to have these things, we need to pay for them, not just borrow for them. Elizabeth?
I'd like to say that I came in partway through Grant's talk, but from what I heard, I agree with all the previous councillors and their messaging. These are very difficult times, and I completely understand what you're saying, Sharon and Sam, about needing to keep a serviceable council going. I don't envy the staff in trying to provide an LTP that's going to be able to meet our requirements, but the community's affordability. It's not just about expectation though, because we do have very mixed expectation. We have people who are the baby boomers who own rental properties, their mortgages are paid off, and they're living off the fruits of their rental income to supplement their pension. And yet we've also got pensioners who are going to be lifelong renters for the rest of their lives and are struggling to find food day to day. And then, as you say, we've got an average age of 35. That's very young. Those are people who are very likely to not have been able to afford their homes and will be renting, and it will be very difficult for them to go forward in this economy to ever be able to afford their own property, and will remain in that renters market with the challenges that brings. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. We talk about development, DCs, which Deborah's always talking about DCs, but my concern here is that the stats are showing us, my husband's in the building industry, I talk to people who are developers, that is not necessarily a growth trade going forward. For them, the costs are astoundingly increasing all the time. We are faced, I feel, with the risk of putting that in our LTP almost as a certainty that we're going to be relying on the DCs to provide quite a lot of finances to help fund the model. But what happens if that dries up and we see the building industry take a real hit and a downturn? Then what happens to our rates and that affordability if that market doesn't meet the requirement that we've put in and that expectation from us? Also, the community are likely to come back and just give us a generic shave the fat. We haven't, I don't feel that our LTP's really outlined how we can shave the fat, truly. And I know that people will say, well, you employ a lot of staff, that's an area where you can cut money, but as Sharon said, we actually need to keep staff on to keep the whole ship functioning. So how are we going to communicate that going forward when we go out to the public consultation, whether it's in person or whether it's just, online, and allow the community to feel that they have a very thorough ability to be able to present ideas for shaving the fat? Because I feel like it's going to be a difficult process for people to address that. From reading the LTP, I think it just sort of looks like, this is how it needs to happen a little bit. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. And there are difficult decisions for us. How much are we going to take on board, and how much has council taken on board of what the community submitted in the past? Because certainly what I hear from the community is there's no point submitting because the council don't ultimately make the decision and don't really take on board our feedback. And I would like to be able to go out there this year and say, actually, we really are wanting to hear you, but I want to know that I can give people that certainty and put my word on it, that if they say cut costs, cut this project, that we're actually going to take that on board.
Yeah, and I think that's, Elizabeth, now you are on the council. So when you say, will the council listen, you need to reflect that you will listen, because that is us all listening to our community. Every year we've sat here and as councillors elected to listen and hear, and we've done that to be able to respond to our community. Often that's been because the community have asked for new and more things rather than for less and to take things out. But I've sat here now and been a part of this council that has been responsive, where councillors have listened, where we haven't been on our phones and on our computers when people have been in the room, because we've been wanting to listen and engage with people. So 100%, that's this process that we're in. And if people don't come and talk to us, we won't be able to hear that voice in the same way. So please continue to encourage them to participate. Do you want to talk about the assumptions piece that Elizabeth raised around future growth? We're going to talk about the growth model later, but there's assumptions within the LTP that will be part of the paper this afternoon. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have all the growth data in front of me, and I think Ben's going to go through that this afternoon. But that growth data is factored into those financials just now. You can see that on that blue line where we've got that rates revenue increasing. So that's a byproduct of what we're expecting in terms of the growth in the area. But I think just, Elizabeth, back to one other thing you're talking about. Look, I understand these numbers are not overly palatable, and we will be, and as Sharon's alluded to as well, we will be looking at what we can adjust, whether that's in the carry forward projects or in the phasing, or potentially taking out some of the projects from the wider capital programme. But I think it's just worth noting as well that this is just a consultation phase. If we do not adopt our long-term plan, there are risks, and the biggest risk is our ability to strike rates. So we need that resolution as a byproduct of the adoption, that allows us to strike rates. If we don't, we're going back to 25% of what the previous rates resolution is, and that's 6%. So where we've got that debt line just now, that is going to look particularly ugly if we do not go down this route. And I don't mean that as a veiled threat, because that's not what it's intended to be, but there is a risk if we do not adopt, because we would need to have an annual plan there. We don't have an annual plan just now. That would ultimately be something that looks like year one of our long-term plan, but the key risk is our ability to strike rates.
One more thing. Sorry, I just forgot one more thing. In terms of what's still yet to come with Three Waters, have we factored in worst case scenario? So there will be no, because Murray's not here, but will there be any potential additional cost to us down the line with what may happen with water infrastructure and expectations from Te Matua Arawai? Do we feel pretty confident that that's completely factored in here?
Yeah, I'll take that. So, yeah, we factored Three Waters into the budget. And we did that quite some time ago. So we had two alternatives. We could have Three Waters in or Three Waters out, and it depended what was going to happen with the government. So the Three Waters is factored in.
Sorry, is that including if we end up paying and joining up with West Coast and doing that type of model? Is that factoring that in as well?
No. So that's not clear, and we don't have the criteria from the government yet. So that will be a completely different discussion as to what the future models may look like.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you for outlining this issue for us again and stepping us through steps to resolve. This does line up with the other briefings that we've had, which may have been public excluded or not, I'm not sure. But over the last few months, this has only resulted in a minor amendment today. And so I've had this information, which has enabled me to make a decision that I'm comfortable going out to consult on the LTP. And what I've heard from you is the process for fix is to go through the LTP process, but also to change our reporting. And you've outlined what our reporting will look like. And I just wanted to say thank you. I think that traffic light report that you've proposed lines up with what we've requested. And we could jump into the debate now about whether or not we're going to move to cut costs. But we will be discussing that as part of the LTP. So all I will say here is that what I've said before, that cost cutting equals service cutting, which does not feel right for a growth district. You've also indicated that you'll come back to us with a review of the capital works projects and propose what to go forward in and with a phased approach, what and when. So thank you. I look forward to receiving that as part of the LTP process. There is a bit more information that I would like, but it's not quite financial. I've heard several councillors now talk and share their anecdotal evidence about the state of our community, which isn't actually lining up with the infometrics data that we're receiving as a governor. And what I mean by that is I sit here as a representative role for a community that is actually truly overrepresented in the most challenging socio-economic circumstances. And they live in a district that has infometric data that says that we actually live, for the majority of our people, in good quality homes with good high income compared to the rest of the population. So something's amiss if what the councillors' experience of their district does not match the actual data. Can we get data shared with us as part of the LTP process? Kia ora.
Yeah, we can have a conversation with Ben and the team around the data that they've got access to.
Thank you. I only want that so we can make good decisions.
Oh, I feel like we're having this afternoon's debate early. But anyway, I guess thank you very, very much for bringing this. And I really appreciate that this is the start of a change of how things are being reported. And literally what we're seeing in this sort of graph and in this LTP and everything else is literally an acknowledgement of the bow wave We keep calling them carry forward projects, that we should probably call them push forward. Carry makes it sound like it's a very passive thing that just kind of happens, as opposed to being a deliberate decision. And we've done that, and that has happened, and we're acknowledging it, and that's a good thing. I'm absolutely in favour of a review of old projects. For instance, the Perrymans Road one, literally cancelling that would probably be equivalent to all of the money that we spend on grants in the community, just that one project. So there's no point in cutting grants to the community, because literally we're paving a short stretch of road, which would cover roughly the same amount of money. I think as well, though, we need to acknowledge, like when we're talking about people and businesses finding difficulties in paying for things like rates, we've really got to acknowledge that we are literally one small factor in people's lives as far as finances go. Like the wider context is things like the NPSUD, which created all the lovely plan changes, which reset all of our projects and how quickly we were going to, reprioritize various things. We couldn't do much about that other than literally just ride that wave. There's, in terms of businesses or, growers, there's supermarket middlemen, there's insurance increases for everybody. We can only be part of the solution for our residents. But we also have to meet the responsibilities of being in local government. And that does not include keeping businesses afloat deliberately by cutting services. That would not sit well with me. If we were going to cut projects for the sake of cutting rates, in the theory that makes people, it gives people more disposable income, which sounds like really weird, but don't know if anybody else wants to put their hand up. I've got a community services card. Anybody else? It's when you get to that stage, the community services are what keep your family trucking along. The libraries, the reserves, the swimming pools, and everything else. I don't mind paying rates, because I know that means that we still have stuff that we can access. We don't go shopping much. We don't go on holidays other than camping. We've already done all that. It's only a coffee a week. What coffee? Yeah. So, and all of the other factors like freight and fuel and insurance, tax and regulations, they're far weightier on people's lives than rates, frankly. We just happen to be the one that people see you at the school gate, in the supermarket, in the library. So we get the blunt end of that. So all I'm trying to say is our responsibility is to provide for well-beings, and economic well-being is only one of those things. The rest of them are what make life living in many ways, when you get down to the point where you haven't got much disposable income. And it would be great if, in turn, the other things like supermarkets would do a bit more of their share, frankly. It shouldn't be down to us to decide whether or not we're going to cut grants to a community group or reduce library hours, because those will have a detrimental effect on residents' life, not a positive.
Thanks, Sophie. Malcolm.
Councillors, I think we need to keep to the forefront of our mind that we are going out for consultation. And I think we're very fortunate this year that nationwide, other councils are having to put their rates up. I see Hiranui this morning, 12.65, I think, was the figure that was in today's press. The reason why I say we're fortunate is because it brings it to the front of people's minds. And I hope that this time we will get substantive submissions, because many times when we do long-term plans and annual plans, we don't get a lot of feedback. We get a lot of feedback after the fact where, I didn't know and I didn't see that, and I wish I'd said something, or why are you doing this? So I'm hoping that we get robust feedback, and that is the time that we as councillors will cut our cloth, as you say, Phil. The key thing is the ability to strike rates. If we don't, we're in deep doo-doo. Review of capital works projects, that comes part of that process we're going through this year. I would personally like to get a level of what the deprivation index is in Selwyn. When I look at Facebook pages and people are looking for references for a household cleaner. It doesn't say much about deprivation to me. It says people have a bit of cash. So I would really like to know where we sit. If we look at our future growth, which we're dealing with later on, Lincoln and Prebbleton are both proposed to grow by 9 times. 15,000 people in Prebbleton, 25,000 in Lincoln. And we're talking about community facilities, and we're talking about Main Street upgrades. It just highlights to me that we can cut the cloth. If we go too early with some of these projects, we are building what is not fit for purpose for the future. And what we have to do and always do is look forward strategically to where we pitch our rates and what we build. So I'm heartened with the fact that we are going forward in a time of a bit of turmoil, and I'm hoping we get good impact. I take Grant's points on board. I look at that graph, and yes, it looks very familiar. I can hear Greg Bell. I can always see him. So don't be dismayed, councillors. We do have the opportunity to change in the next few months once we get our submissions. That's the key message.
Thanks, Malcolm. Shane?
Tēnā rā tātou katoa. E te whare tu nei tēnā koe, e rau mana whenua tēnā koe, kai hoi te waka. Ngā mihi mana, ngā kōrero o te rā. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for the conversation this morning. I think catastrophizing as representatives isn't particularly helpful, as Malcolm's already spoke about there, and as Grant has also spoken about. There are areas, particular areas that can be looked at through the consultation process, and I want to thank the team and your influence, Sharon, and your leadership over the since taking the helm at bringing the legacy issues to light, of which we, those of us that have been here, have been a part of. And whilst it may appear to be at a crisis, there's an inflection point that potentially has the opportunity to rationalise, because what we're looking at is the realism, and as a council, we're sitting midpoint currently across the nation. There's increase right across it. If there's areas where we can potentially around the edges there, around discretionary funds, well, I would totally support lunches. Why don't we bring our own lunch as a gesture of goodwill? And it's not for me to shoot the messenger for bringing the information to us, but it is in line with what we've asked as mana whenua Megan has brought to us, and the time for further robust debate on what is in and what is out will be during the consultation process and through discussions with our hapuri, our community. So I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Alison and Craig, for presenting that to us this morning. It'll be it's on our agenda this afternoon for the special meeting, and we've got another 5 or 6 things to get through before lunch. So any further conversation on that will take place this afternoon during the meeting. We now move on to the Piki Amakura Youth Strategy, and welcome the team to come and present its document 2 and 2A in today's agenda.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Claire Quirk. I'd like to introduce Hannah.
Morning.
Hannah Eddy, who did a lot of this work. Today we're going to give you an update on Piki Amakura, the Sawan Youth Strategy, and Te Pai Pai, the Sawan Ageing Positively Strategy. You'll recall in December and January that we asked you to complete a survey on these two strategies and the economic development strategy. Today we're going to share with you what you told us through these surveys. Once we have analysed all the data from our engagements with residents and community groups, we will be able to look to where your input intersects. We anticipate that there will be some themes that council, residents and community organisations have in common and some themes that differ. We will be able to talk about this at our next briefing to you in early May. So why are we working on a youth and ageing strategy for Sawan? Population growth is the primary driver for these strategies. You'll all be aware of the massive population growth across the whole district. In the next 20 years, the youth and the 65 plus population growth is considerable and over twice the national growth for these groups. The youth growth rate is 46% for Sawan compared with 11.4% for New Zealand. This means that Sawan has the second highest youth growth rate of any TLA in the country. And the 65 plus growth rate is 158% for Sawan compared with 67% for New Zealand. This means that Sawan has the highest growth rate for older people of any TLA in the country. This massive growth in these populations drives the need for strategies that enable us to respond effectively to the needs of these groups. Piki Amakura and Te Pai Pai are among the suite of strategies and plans that sit within the overarching umbrella of Future Sawan for the people and community priority. These two strategies align with and will deliver on Future Sawan. We've just finished the engagement for both of these strategies, and our engagement included surveys, focus groups, forums and events. In the handout in your meeting pack for today, you will see the number of people involved in the various engagements. The important thing to note is that our engagement connected with over 5% of each of the target population, which can give us confidence that we're hearing from a range of voices. The team are currently working hard on the data analysis. Once this is complete, they will work with groups across council on developing the problem definitions and input for the strategy writing. We plan to present a draft strategy to you in June for your input. We will take your input from this meeting to refine the draft, ready to present a final draft for your consideration a month later in July. The strategy will be high level with a vision and mission and priority focus areas. Once you have endorsed the strategy, we will work across the council groups on the development of a detailed action plan. I will now hand over to Hannah, who will describe what you as councillors and the Malvern Community Board members said in the survey.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Hannah and I am a Community Policy Advisor for the Community Strategy and Policy team. As Claire already alluded to, Sawan is going to have a youth population bubble in the next few years. So 35% of Sawan's population currently is under the age of 25. However, projected growth of youth in Sawan is due to increase, almost twice as high as national growth, with the largest population in Rolleston with 64% growth. Today we're providing a summary of your responses to the councillor survey. You may recall we asked councillors and the community board members about what needs you were hearing or seeing in the district and ward. what you think young people need to live good lives in the district and in the ward, what outcomes you wanted from the strategy for council, and what outcomes you wanted from the strategy for community. We received a total of 12 responses to the survey. 10 responses were from councillors and 2 responses were from Malvern Community Board members. Over half of the responses were from the Malvern and Springs wards, with 2 responses from the Mayor and Manawhenua, 2 responses from the Ellesmere wards, and 1 from the Rolleston ward. We can have a look, but we only received 1. So jumping into your responses, first off, we asked about what needs you are seeing or hearing in the ward or the district. So you identified things to do, transport and services as the highest needs for youth. So things to do had a broad range of activities, everything from sports to arts. Transport identified that there was a need for transport options which were accessible without parental intervention. And services included health, provision, mentoring, and leadership programs. In addition, you identified that there were needs in employment opportunities for youth to have a sense of belonging and value within the community, spaces responding to antisocial behaviour, and training and further education. There were some key differences between the ward and the district responses, particularly if you look at things to do and services. There was a higher response rate for the ward versus the district, which may indicate that you think that there is a higher need for these activities and services in the wards rather than a district-wide approach. Moving on to the good lives question. So again, things to do was a key theme that came through. Training and education, services, a sense of belonging and affordability as well. So things to do, services, sense of belonging, spaces, transport and employment had very similar answers to the previous question. Training and education included both formal and informal training opportunities. So tertiary education, university, ara, and other learning opportunities such as budgeting, cooking, learning to drive. Affordability discussed mainly around affordable housing and the affordability of food, fuel, activities and services. Again, there were some differences between the ward and the district responses, particularly again with things to do, with a higher increase in the ward responses versus the district, again indicating that the respondents may believe that there is a higher need for these things in the ward rather than the district. There were also some differences in the responses between the needs question and the good lives question, which may indicate that you would prefer a strategic approach to addressing both short-term and long-term goals for community improvement rather than a case-by-case basis. Thirdly, we asked you about what outcomes you wanted for the council. The main desired outcomes you wanted were to meet young people's needs and to have measurable goals. So meeting young people's needs included understanding and developing Selwyn's young people and catering to individual communities. And there was a clear desire for a measurable, clear and achievable strategy. In addition to these 2 main goals, you also requested you wanted services, which again included health provision, mentoring and leadership program. And also you wanted partnership with schools, NGOs and central government, input from young people and their whānau, a strengthened community and less crime. The focus on the strategic and holistic goals in this outcomes question may further indicate that you have a preference towards a strategic approach rather than a case-by-case approach. And lastly, we asked you about what outcomes you wanted for the community. The main desired outcomes that you said were a strengthened community and increased youth contribution. So strengthened community, some of you said that the community were reluctant to engage with young people, believing that they were disruptive or causing trouble. And you stated that you would like this perception to change. You also identified a desire for an increased contribution from young people, particularly in matters of consultation and them giving their input to council processes and other processes generally. In addition, very similar to the previous question, you also identified you wanted partnership with government, less crime, increased public transport, affordability, mental health services and support for whānau. So now's some time for feedback if you wish. Do you have anything to note around Council's direction in relation to your responses?
Thanks, Hannah, for running us through that. It's great. It'd be really interesting to see the overlay of what we were thinking compared to what the youth feedback looks like. And I guess noting there was some emphasis on some of those questions where there might be 7 compared to 1, but sometimes the difference was like just 1 or 2 of us around the council. So reading too much into the bar graphs might be a little unnecessary. The feedback from the young people, I think, is going to be really important in this process. Deborah.
Thank you. And yes, I did fill out the survey. With regards to the fact that you said there was more interest in localised as ward councillors instead of across the district, could that be skewed because we all live in and associate with our communities in different areas and we have different demographics? We have a rural community and young people living in our rural communities. We also have in the likes of the eastern area of Pebbleton and Lincoln, an affluent population which has access to services that other parts of a district don't have. So just highlighting that that's why you may have got slightly a different skewed response because as councillors, we live within our local communities and that's how we see it and how we talk to people about it. And Rolleston will be totally different again. Then you go to West Melton, totally different, and then you go to Darfield, and that will be different. So I think that's why it's been skewed that way because there's not one district approach for Selwyn.
We'll note that.
Thanks, Deborah. Did you want to comment on it? Yeah.
I will just take note of that. We definitely have seen a lot of strong feedback about the need for local events and local activity for young people.
Elizabeth.
Currently, what community projects and services are the youth engaging with? Obviously, we've got our youth council when they run a few events and things. Do we have anything that's regular, long-standing, or what sort of things have happened recently?
There is a program of events and activities that are targeted towards young people. So there are things like the pool parties that run through the sport team, and there are things through the arts, culture and lifelong learning team that are targeted towards young people being able to play on gaming and do things that are more free form in terms of activity. There are also things that we do as part of other events like Culture Fest and our event program throughout the year that have appealed to young people, as well as the events that are happening through the Youth Hub, So that is often things around basketball and young people getting together to play sport and do activities. So there is a lot, but there's a lot of opportunity to do more.
Yeah. Sorry, I mean specifically what are the youth council running themselves as programs?
If I could just respond, we're getting a presentation from the Youth Council next week, so perhaps that would be a good opportunity to get that feedback.
Kia ora, Sam. Tēnā kura Claire and Hannah. Thank you very much for the report. I was wondering, Piki Amokura, I was wondering with the information collated, is there any thought around working towards the development of an app? There's a mention of various different services, and how do we work towards allowing our rangatahi access that faster? And my thought would be around, on the phone. So is there any thoughts around that?
We haven't moved on to actions just yet, but it's really good to get that feedback, and we'll note that.
I just wanted to touch on the services and support in the ward area. And I think that was some of the feedback that I'd given around that. And really, it's based on there's no way for our rural youth to get to Rolleston, apart from mum and dad taking you there. And so I look, even at our youth council, we don't have representatives from Ellesmere or Melbourne on the youth council because they can't get there. And so is there a way to be more flexible around this? And that's something that I'm happy to work through with the youth council to get their views, because it's really important. But I guess, there's a couple of options that I see is it's either get the youth to Rolleston or support them in their rural area. So sorry, it's not really a question, but yeah.
We'll definitely note that as part of the development of actions.
Thank you. Grant.
Given the context of our last presentation, I'm assuming that when we get these two new strategies presented, there'll be an associated budget request coming with it?
We are realigning our existing staff work plans so that they can support these two strategies. So we're working within our work program to make sure that we can service the actions. So there is a very small operational budget that is about 40,000 that is in the LTP per year to support the activity.
I think we'd like to see that, I would like to see how we're going to fund it, because if you're doing more than the existing envelope, something's being cut, or there was a lot of spare capacity. So where did it come from?
Thank you. Phil, is there an answer to the grants piece there?
So I've got a question for you as well, so maybe I should ask mine, you can do them both. The presentation that they're talking about that's going to come back in June and July, is that already one that's in your diary reports to come back? Or is it in addition to the diary reports you've got coming back?
I can't think, but I'm pretty sure we have scheduled to give you ongoing updates, and that's one of them as part of the schedule. In terms of Councillor Miller, I'm not entirely clear of what you're asking. I guess what Claire was saying is that we have currently repositioned the staff that we have to be more focused on these strategies and the work plans that fall out of them, recognising that a lot of the work is actually about advocating to funders and central government and other providers to actually do some service delivery or do some funding into Selwyn. In addition to that, we have made some provision for a $40,000 cost, and it may be that when we get to the action plans we don't require it. It may be that we, as Councillor Dean said, that we are having to cut the cloth because that's what we've put in the long-term plan budget. It's just we haven't been able to line everything up to have the completed action plan and do justice to the consultation and engagement in time for this the LTP process. So we're trying to manage that. Does that answer your question?
Not really. Well, you're delivering 2 new strategies, and you're telling me that it's going to be no extra cost because you've built it into the existing resources you have. And I'm saying if you're building 2 new strategies into the existing resources, either something's being cut and not being done, or we were overstaffed in those areas already, aren't we? There's only 2 answers to that.
Grant, I know that community services and the delivery is one of your favourite. In terms of the executive teams have been really clear about looking at prioritisation and workload and trying to do as much as we can within the existing resources. And that's simply what Denise is speaking to, and being clear and focused on what will get the best wins for our community members.
Not a negativity towards the programs, it's just how it's going to be funded and delivered.
Presenting that report. The 2 of you staying on for the next one as well? Great, carry on.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Jenny Barnes-Graham. I'm a community policy analyst working alongside Hannah and her team. Thank you for having us here today to give you a bit of an update on the councillor survey that you filled out for us. Okay, let's get to the next slide. Okay, so as Claire mentioned before, Selwyn is facing the highest 20-year rate of 65 plus age group population growth of any territorial authority in New Zealand. In 20 years, our age 65 population is predicted to grow from 13% today to over 21% of total Selwyn's total population. And this represents a growth rate of 158% compared to a projected national growth rate of 67%. So the scale at which we need to prepare will be a lot quicker than other councils. Right, next slide. So in the survey you filled out in December and January, we asked you to answer several questions. And we will now take you through your responses to these questions. We asked you about the needs that you're seeing and hearing from older people in your wards and district. We asked you what you think older people need to live good lives in the district and wards, and what outcomes you would like as council, and also what outcomes do you want from Te Paepae Ageing Positively strategy for the community. So we'll just take you through those responses. Hannah's just been through this slide, so altogether we got 12 responses and 10 were from councillors and 2 from the Melbourne Community Board members. Right, so the first question was, what needs are you seeing and hearing among older people in the district and your ward? So transport was a huge issue at both ward and district level that you reported hearing from people. You also identified affordability and cost of living, and that was more at the ward than the district. And you mentioned low-cost social opportunities and council facility access. The other thing that you mentioned was more community services at both the ward and district level, but in terms of health services, better health services was more at the district level. Other things that you mentioned and identified were more appropriate housing options, so people can downscale and free up capital. And also rest home facilities, including dementia units. Other things that you're hearing out in the Motu are accessible infrastructure, particularly in the wards, and also some people are having issues with technology and internet access as they lose services and they have to do more and more things online. So the differences in the ward and district responses may indicate you are hearing a greater need for health services and appropriate housing at the district level, and affordability and accessible infrastructure at the wards. Right, so the second question was, what services do your residents need to age well in place? And we asked you to think about the council services. So in both district and wards, more housing options came up a lot, and better healthcare access were popular. There was a key need for wards to have better transport, either public or alternative options, with some concern for older residents' isolation if mobility issues or loss of licence impacted their ability to drive a car. Interestingly, better information connections and dissemination of what's on and what's available to people in terms of services generally and also ours was a key need for wards, but not district. Social connection was seen as a district need, and more community support services was a need for both ward and district. We then asked you about what outcomes you'd like from Te Pai Ageing Positively strategy for the community. And there were quite a disparate number of responses, but where we had a bit of consensus, there were 3 responses about a sense of belonging and feeling valued. So people can be connected and participating in their communities. 2 responses were about housing close to family farms, an issue for rural folk. And then we had quite a few one-off responses, and all really good guidance for us. So covering as many genuine needs as possible, providing for the needs of tamutu, valuing volunteers as essential, and advocating for community and rural services. And also allowing halls, someone mentioned allowing halls to be used free of charge for some 65 plus people. So have we got that? Is that the right one? Awesome. So what outcomes you indicated for the community that you really would like to see in the strategy? So everybody wanted something different. So we've managed to summarise the ideas. So you'd like us to be identifying gaps and being informed about our locality needs and wants. You would like us to be agile in response and trial new ways of doing things. You'd also like us to set some baseline expectations about what people want by articulating strategy, purpose, goals, and also providing clear frameworks. And we also need to be having a work plan to, with measures to measure our response and success in terms of when we get to the action plan stage. Some of you said council needs to become an advocate facilitating agency. We also need to focus on rural services and support older people with their independence and wellbeing. And then we had suggestions we need to provide accessibility and age design improvements for infrastructure. We then asked you, is there anything else you want to tell us? And what was really key here is that, again, quite an array of answers, but there was a really good suggestion that the council role is advocacy and it's not to be competing with NGO services, and that we should take a strategic role in facilitating NGO and agency integrated approaches. We also need to be looking at funding charitable trusts and bringing that brings services to rural and remote areas. As part of this, we need to value volunteers as essential, and we also need to think about ward-specific strategies. Right. Would you like to note anything about the direction you've provided in relation to your responses?
Thanks for presenting that. It's really interesting to see the level of growth that there'll be. And we know that we're a growing district, and this morning we've talked about the needs to provide for growth. But the level of change can seem quite dramatic. The 100% growth is big, but that only brings up basically the rest of the district to an area that some parts of our district are already at, or not even. So our district's currently about 11% over the age of 65, except if you're out in our more rural places, they're already over 25% over the age of 65. So this report's actually just asking for Rolleston to please have the same services that we're already providing in Darfield and Leeston. And if that's as far as our ambition goes, it's not very high at all, because people that are living in Leeston and Darfield and our more rural spaces don't have access to services, even though they're a quarter of the population in those areas. So I'm keen to sort of tease out through this process how you see not only the district being lifted to serve our older population, but also the areas where no growth would still have a higher proportion of older people than what Rolleston might in 10 years' time, and how we're going to be quite ward specific. And even within the wards, we're in a district that's got 20 different communities, and without the public transport options, that does make actually accessing lots of areas quite tricky. So could you just speak a little bit to how you see how you're going to use this information to be ward specific in our responses?
We've cut the growth rates, the 20-year growth rates by wards. The lowest growth rate for ward in Selwyn district is Ellesmere, and that's 99%, so that's still a little bit higher than national. The highest is around 190, a little bit over that for Rolleston. So basically that means Rolleston catches up. But there's still going to be that growth rate that we're seeing elsewhere in the country for the other wards. The good news about ward-specific strategies and responses is, and we'll speak to this in our next update, is that we have so many volunteers in Selwyn. We have got a really robust volunteer take-up, and when we did the survey, we also asked, if you aren't volunteering currently, would you like to volunteer? And the number of yeses is over 40%. So we actually have, so the work would be capacity building and growing volunteer sector, and to assist with the responses, and to do that in each ward. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, Claire?
No, we'll note that feedback and consider it before we come back next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, being in this situation and living in a rural area, the biggest problem that my wife and I have is that at some stage we won't be able to stay there because there's no transport. And I see that be the biggest thing in rural areas. But then we started looking at sections in areas like Darfield, and we found a section which we liked, but there's covenants on them that you have to build a house of a certain size. So we are getting to the stage where there isn't many alternatives but to go back to an older house in one of the areas in one of the townships. So I think, the biggest thing for me is to find somewhere to live where I can get the things that I need, like doctors and even food, because in Colgate there is nothing. So I think, rural areas are really missing out on some of these things as you get older, and the people in the area talking to me are saying, oh, we're going to have to find somewhere else to live. Where do you reckon we should go? And it's sort of, I don't want to go to Rolleston. And so you move out of Selwyn just about, because there is very little for older people.
The provision of local services is definitely something we're seeing a lot.
And also the more appropriate houses for over 65s to cater for the 1 and 2 beds. Thank you.
Thanks. Sophie.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you very much. I love between this and the other survey as well. There's a lot of work gone in there. I'm hoping that at some point we might be able to. The responses have obviously been massive from the slide that we do have in our pack, which is great. Is there something that shows the gender and ethnicity split of them? Does that match what, so for instance, we've got certain ethnic groups which are increasing in the district, and they may have different needs as they grow older, or their children may have different views as well. I'm just wondering whether that's taken into account. But less of a question. I love that there's quite a bit of alignment between the responses, particularly around transport and affordability. And that's not a surprise, but it's kind of good to have the data to back it up for that advocacy part. And it's always interesting reflecting on it and realizing that in 20 years, I'll be part of that over 65 statistic, which is slightly terrifying, but you know.
How many years?
One thing as well, in terms of all of these increases, and I know this isn't to do with the council responses to your questions, but with all the increase in the number of young people and the increase in elderly, is it possible at some point to see where this leaves us in terms of the working age population? Because that's going to have some massive implications in terms of productivity for the area. If not saying that those who are over 65 don't work, because increasing numbers don't have much choice other than to work. But in terms of your full-time GDP related stuff, which isn't the world's greatest measure, but you know, that's what we measure stuff on. The only other comment I've got is I'm slightly worried by the fact that we keep referring to wards. We know that ward boundaries change all the time. Here they will change more frequently than anywhere else. So I'm just wondering whether it's possible to, instead of go ward-specific strategies, go for urban, peri-urban, rural, maybe even remote, you know, because that's going to have a longer lasting impact rather than suddenly trying to apply, you know, 3 years ago, you'd have been applying a Springs ward strategy to somewhere like Green Park, but it's Ellesmere now.
Just your comment about workforce, we're definitely looking at that element in the workforce plan as part of the economic development strategy. So this is the benefit of doing the three strategies together. There's a lot of really great information that we're sharing between the strategies.
Yeah, kia ora. That was really confronting, Sophie. Thank you. I had to quickly go, oh my gosh, how old will I be? And I would have just tipped in the bucket. So you will be catering for me, so thank you.
Thanks.
So there's like really good generic information. So when we're looking at ageing well strategy, there will be things that will be required for, it doesn't matter which district that we live in, and that's what we've heard about different types of housing, and potentially also providing for, you know, that rest home kind of type of retirement living, good transport and health services. But what would be really helpful, if we're going to plan well, have a strategy that really plans well, it's getting into more data about what does our age population look like in 20 years' time. Are we going to have an age population that has a mortgage-free, live in good, healthy homes and have good income, good disposable income? Because if that's who the population primarily is in this district, then we would want to be planning for ways for them to spend their disposable income in this district. But if they're actually going to be still working with mortgages and needing other types of services, then we need to provide for that. So I'm not quite sure how we get that data, but it would be really helpful because it'll enable us to write a really good strategy.
Thank you for that, and that's definitely noted. What's good about the survey is we've asked some questions already, which can give us a bit of a baseline, and then we can, you know, compare that to national trends and research, and it'd probably be a cross-council collaboration to try and project that, because it starts getting a little bit complicated. But I can definitely, we'll definitely try and give you some information from the survey about that. Yep.
Kia ora. Tēnā kōrua. Thank you very much for the information. What the report identified that there's a number of there is a number of agencies that have been highlighted that have an outcome or reflect the aspirations of our community, being health and transport. And through the survey and I guess the subsequent reports, how do we give more teeth to ensure that a contribution is made on behalf of from the other agencies to contribute to the well-being of our district? And it's not so much of a question, it's really just that there are the responsibility lies with other organisations to provide for, and as an advocate, surely it's our responsibility to do that, and especially for our remote communities like Taumatu. How what avenues or how can we enable access to facilities? And Sammy mentioned, Leeson, that currently we've got a building not so fit for purpose, and whilst there is access for our kaumatua kuia to hydrotherapy here and perhaps Starfield, they don't have access in Ellesmere, for instance, for the time being. So for me, it's about ensuring that, and it was something that Jeff Bland said a long time ago around loneliness, is certainly for our old people, that's something that we can strive towards reducing. Kia ora.
We'll note that. That's absolutely what we're hearing.
Thank you, Shane. And just to add to Claire's response, in the survey, mana whenua were of a particular interest to us in terms of asking questions about access to marae and services close by marae. So we asked the iwi Māori who filled out the survey to actually rate some of these issues, and it just is a start of collecting some data around that so we can tell the story to external agencies and central government and other NGOs about why they need to come to Selwyn. Kia ora.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Hi, I was just talking to Denise. I've completely forgotten the name of it, but there was a speaker that we brought in who spoke at one of our community wellbeing forums, and they talked about an approach which I hope that we can integrate here. You've talked about 40% volunteerism. That's absolutely magic. Now, this community group has where it's delegated, so which would take the load off us as council, because obviously the last thing we want to do is have to employ more staff to operate that kind of initiative. So this community, I think it's like a community trust. Denise will be able to fill us in on that. Anyway, it's place based. So each group in their region come together. They have a bit of a committee, and then it's all worked from there within that structure within the community. So it means that we can help sort of work alongside and facilitate, but it doesn't put an enormous strain on us. And I think it's worth exploring that model, and then maybe they could, showcase what they do well.
Thank you. Yes, we're certainly looking at having some local sort of volunteer type expos. So there'd be, the volunteering people in that community who are looking, and people that are looking to volunteers coming together and being able to have that opportunity to meet and connect. So definitely that's part of our plan.
Jenny and Claire, thank you very much for presenting that to us. We look forward to the next part of the presentation and through the process. We'll take a break and have some morning tea. We're a little bit behind time, so 15 minutes from now we'll start again at 10 to. And we're back. Update on economic development strategy, document 4. Claire, hand over to you.
Thank you. We'd like to update you on the progress with the economic development strategy, seek feedback on the direction we're taking, and ensure we're meeting the ambitions of Council. I'd like to introduce Johnny O'Donnell, who's online, and he has been assisting us as engagement lead and draft strategy author. Johnny will be listening to feedback and supporting with questions at the end. Our videographer, James, is here filming this presentation because we want to keep our stakeholders informed and bring them along on the journey. This is an economic development strategy for a future-fit Selwyn that builds on our success and plays to our strengths by providing for both immediate action and long-term intergenerational thinking. It creates a robust foundation for purposeful growth in our economy. Selwyn has enjoyed growth and development, but faces structural challenges and untapped potential in our economy that we need to address. Selwyn District Council is leading the strategy in partnership with business, community and mana whenua. Every decision and investment has an economic impact, so this is an integrated and whole-of-system approach to getting it right for our community.
I've got no time to talk on this, but just to give you clarity and confidence that this work is feeding into how we're approaching our future Selwyn stuff. So the conversations in the economic strategy have talked about big high-level things and also big actions at the bottom. So it's covering across the layers in there. So we'll be bringing all that information into the future Selwyn process as well. Done.
Thanks. Thank you. All right, so today we'll talk through some high-level insights into the recent survey that was sent to you and the Melbourne Community Board members. We'll give you an overview of a draft framework and spotlight examples of priority actions. We will also let you know what's next and welcome questions at the end. We asked you what the distinctive traits are that make Selwyn an ideal place for businesses in your respective areas or wards. We heard that our business community has a unique sense of optimism, that there are plenty of opportunities with population growth and key local partners. We have distinct transport connectivity through rail, the inland port and nearby airport, and that Selwyn has a unique proposition for both visitors and lifestyle attraction. We asked you for one thing you'd expect to see come from this work or one thing you'd like to highlight for consideration. We heard that local workforce is key, that council becomes an enabler and supports innovation, and that a strong identity is developed. We started engagement in November and have delivered a range of events and activities in the past 5 months. We've taken on board the valuable insights from business leaders and key partners, and we will now share our early thinking on the strategy framework.
So starting with the vision, our future fit economy sustains our people and places for generations to come. Our outcomes, these are the objectives for our activity and the lens through which we will view all decision-making and investment to ensure it aligns with our vision for growth and development in Selwyn. These are resilience, productivity, connectivity and identity. Our mission. The mission is to deliver growth that makes sense for us and benefits our whole community, providing enduring benefits to our people and places.
The strategy is built around 5 major opportunities: growing Selwyn's food and fibre economy, Selwyn is the engine room for innovation, accelerating Māori economic development and recognising the strengths of the Māori economy, unlocking infrastructure through powering progress and self-efficiency, encouraging visitation that aligns with our economic strengths, protects our natural environment,
and promotes lifestyle opportunities for talent attraction. So we need to get the settings right to make the change happen. These are about shifting from a transactional to a strategic approach by powering up partnerships with mana whenua, key institutions and communities. Attracting, retaining and maximising investment opportunities for Selwyn in public, private and iwi Māori sectors by ensuring we are investment ready and playing our part. Attracting a future fit workforce and growing from within by matching the right people with the right opportunities and ensuring everyone shares in our economic success. And better showcasing and articulating who we are through an integrated identity that plays to our strengths and recognises our rich bicultural story. So the priority actions have been shaped and informed by the business leaders and partners who have been involved in the journey with us. We will spotlight some examples and would appreciate your feedback on whether we are on the right track. These are still under development, do not include our business as usual activities, and it is not an exhaustive list. Throughout the next few slides, you may hear us reference regional and city deals with some overseas examples. This is a potential mechanism for central government partnerships, and there will be a council briefing on this on the 1st of May.
Selwyn Futures Forum, Partnering Up. The Selwyn Economic Forum will align with our strategic goals to promote collaboration for a future fit Selwyn. It is designed to meet the needs of our community by leveraging collective intelligence, mobilising resources and positioning us to respond effectively. This forum will help with maintaining the momentum of the strategy, providing a collective voice and unlocking opportunities for public and private sector partnership. It would act as the forum through which a collective city or regional deal proposal could be developed. Working groups would form around priority actions with members who have expertise and vested interest. The investment strategy, leveraging investment. The development of the investment strategy is key to ensuring that financial resources are allocated in ways that reinforce our strategic economic objectives. The strategy will be critical for channeling investments into projects and sectors that promise the most significant economic benefits for our community. The strategy will require a thorough analysis of current investment flows, potential sectors for growth, and partnership opportunities. We would conduct a comprehensive investment opportunities analysis from the economic development strategy to inform potential investments. Waikirikiri Selwyn Identity Project. Selwyn has a strong rational appeal that has fueled the attraction of business and talent here. We can strengthen this by creating a greater emotional appeal, providing a holistic approach to our destination brand, and creating an identity that doesn't just sell our story but crafts it. We will focus on what sets Selwyn apart to establish unique identifiers that will be memorable and meaningful, highlight innovation, build community pride, attract investment and talent, promote Selwyn as open for business, and make Selwyn a must visit with unique experiences. Many things that appeal to visitors also appeal to people residing in Selwyn for lifestyle reasons, so the sector is also an important conduit for worker attraction. Innovation Hub, becoming the knowledge capital. Developing a physical space in Rolleston that is designed for innovation and collaboration. Innovation hubs drive economic, social, and technological advancements. Imagine a space that grows with us, stage by stage, putting Selwyn on the map as a hub of bright ideas and future-fit exports. It's a commitment to nurturing innovation, facilitating low-risk expansion into Selwyn for larger companies, and providing growth opportunities for SMEs and startups. The Cardiff City deal in the UK provided funding for the development of new sites and premises to support business local growth attraction as an example of this.
The proposal to establish Selwyn as the Living Lab presents a strategic endeavour to position our district at the forefront of agricultural innovation. This action helps us treat our entire food and fibre ecosystem as a living lab, a place for experimentation and innovation across our supply chain, including sustainable food production, processing, packaging, and distribution technologies. It's about pulling development out of the lab and into real businesses and on real farms in our district. The Living Lab will also encourage education tourism by providing hands-on learning experiences and high-value visitation that targets those who wish to learn why they leisure. This is about showcasing the future of food through storytelling, educational tourism, and spotlighting innovation occurring in the sector. Workforce program. Develop a skills and workforce program that focuses on growing from within and whole of life employment, retaining young people, university graduates, and local talent to provide the necessary pipeline for our economy. The program would service the short-term and long-term needs by providing pathways that address skills shortages, as well as ensuring we have a workforce prepared for Selwyn's future. This would be informed by the Living Lab, key industries, as well as renewable energy and other emerging sectors. An overseas example of city deals includes the London Growth Deal, which provided investment into holistic support to help residents into long-term employment. Māori Economic Development Partnership. Fundamentally, this is about creating a focused work stream defined by mana whenua, but held within the wider economic context to recognise that the Māori economy is not just a standalone sector, but it is integrated right across the system. It's about supporting the development of Māori businesses in Selwyn and strengthening the application of Māori ideas and knowledge. Building this partnership will involve a concerted effort to engage with Māori businesses and stakeholders, creating capacity to harness opportunities in this space. It's for the benefit for all Māori and for our whole economy and community. This action aims to transform Selwyn into a leader in sustainable and renewable energy in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This is through the development of an energy plan that drives activity to create more renewable energy, targeted economic growth, and better energy security. The plan would support an independent, decentralised energy network with local partners Lincoln University, Orion, as well as public and private sectors, and develop a pipeline of projects to build renewable energy sources. The image you see on your left has been sourced from the Townsville City Deal, which has a focus on renewable energy innovation, technology, and investment.
So while these are all projects, they're not all funded by council, so they'll be funding from multiple sources in terms of partnerships and other funders. The other thing that we'd like to note is that they will all be have really strong KPIs associated with them, milestones, performance indicators, and they'll be really specific things like job creation, productivity enhancements. So they'll all be measurable and deliverable.
So where to from here? So we're seeking your feedback today to inform the direction of the draft strategy and the priority actions. We will then be circulating an executive summary with the 50 business leaders in our advisory group for feedback in April. The full draft document will then be shared with Council on the 1st of May, where you will have another opportunity to provide input. Following this, all documentation will go to Council seeking final endorsement on the 12th of June. Great. We'd now like to welcome any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you for running through that. It's got a couple of things right at the very beginning of the presentation around the outcomes that you talked through. And I really like where you finished and all the things that have come out from the conversation and the working together with others in our community, but the outcomes to me didn't seem as ambitious as your outcomes list didn't seem as ambitious as I think some of the conversation had been, and didn't really match what you were saying at the very end. So to me, that there was just a wee bit of a mismatch in what those initial outcomes were. And was that because they were developed earlier and then these other things have just come out afterwards? And if so, before we develop what the overall strategy is going to be, I think we need to relook at what's possible, because the ambition to me wasn't quite there at the front end.
We'll note that, and Johnny's listening in too, so we'll definitely note that.
Cool, thank you. Elizabeth.
Just a couple of things. Did you say London growth deal? Yeah, I just wondering if you could tell us more about that. That's something to do with getting the residents into the long-term employment. Is it a loan? It just sounds like a free money throw, but obviously there's always a catch because nobody gives money away for free. So I'd just love to know a bit more about that. And also with the Selwyn energy plan, I completely support having solar, but I do think we need to have see the economic business case and the circular economy provided before we put our name on this, because I think it's important that we have a futuristic look at how this is going to work long term. And I've heard varying things from people in the sector in regards to the way that this is going to be proliferated in the community. So it'd be nice to get some clarity around those questions. Thank you.
Sorry, I can respond to the city deals, if that's okay. I'm trying to signal and not signal. I think we've alluded to before, Elizabeth, that regional and city deals is a concept that the government has floated. They're currently working through some of the criteria. Obviously, as we are looking through our economic development, we're taking a whole of organisation approach, and we're looking at international models, which includes UK and Australia, because they have been running these regional and city deals. So you will be having a presentation on the 1st of May that will help give you a greater depth of understanding, and it'll be a public briefing for councillors through some expertise that has had some input and oversight of deliveries of these programmes. So what we're doing is we're planning for our future. We're thinking about what these regional and city deals may look like, and using some of that as a little bit of evidence-based.
Just your microphone, sorry.
The London growth deal is an example, not a...
Yes,
yep.
That's right.
Just in terms of answering the question about the energy plan, the energy plan would likely be spearheaded with Lincoln University and other partners. So what we showed you was just a very sort of brief outline. It would be much more comprehensive.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in again. And Elizabeth, when Vim came to present, it was very clear about not asking council for money. It's about, what is our role as partners, and could it be that whatever strategy they bring back to council to consider, our role may be more about our policy setting. And where council sits in terms of policy related to energy, etc. So there are different ways that council can participate, lead and coordinate.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, Kelda, could you take us back to the slide that has the 4 main strategic direction statements? Yeah, strategic priorities. So farming, innovation, Māori economy. What's infrastructure?
So it's really about thinking about infrastructure as an opportunity for doing things better and innovation, and using infrastructure as an opportunity that, large things are happening. Is there a better way to do them? Are there smarter and more cutting edge technologies and things when we are looking at infrastructure opportunities, and infrastructure itself being able to really provide for the future economy?
So will we, maybe I've missed something, but I didn't get this in advance. So I might have missed something here. This
is the first time we're saying this, isn't it?
Yeah, first time. Okay, right. Okay. So So it's hard. I don't understand what that means, so I can't provide feedback until I better understand it.
We'll provide much more detail around that one. That wasn't one that we covered in the examples.
Yeah, and the energy plan is under
Oh, the
unlocking
energy
infrastructure. Yeah. Johnny is also on the call here. Johnny, if you'd like to comment.
Oh, yeah. Kia ora tātou. I can make a quick comment. Sorry, I can't see you all that well, so just pass it over to me if you need me to answer anything. They've covered that quite well in terms of infrastructure, and in a plan like this, you could easily see infrastructure sitting under one of the system enablers. One of the things that became quite clear during the engagement process with businesses is that they see infrastructure both as an enabler, but also an opportunity to take what is the biggest challenge we're all grappling with, and actually look at it through a new lens, which is what are the opportunities for us to lead, to innovate, to do things differently in that space. And the obvious potential priority at this point in time would be the energy plan conversations you've been having. That's a really strong focus area, but it really is looking right across your infrastructure set and going, instead of seeing that as just something that requires investment and requires more input, actually, can we sit that within our strategic priorities for the economy as a driver as well, and as opportunity we can unlock to add to the growth too. So that's why it's sitting in that space. And yeah, as I said, there's a lot more detail sitting under that can be provided.
Okay, thank you. And what about knowledge capital? What does that mean?
That was talked about earlier on.
I can jump on that if you want.
Yeah. Either or.
Yep.
Innovation. Go, Johnny.
Okay, I go. Sorry, I wish I was in the room with you all. So the knowledge capital is the focused area around that came through of looking at the sweet spot, I guess, the amalgamation of the strengths you've already got with large academic institutions, the emerging economy that's occurring in terms of the IP you're developing right across your economy. That's actually focused on knowledge as the export, knowledge as the economic driver. You're in quite a unique position where if you sit those two things side by side, really, really good institutions as a baseline, an economy that's innovating and growing and focusing more on knowledge as an economic driver. If you sit those two things together, then there's an opportunity that unlocks around becoming the knowledge capital. There's some easy kind of linking and joint up thinking that would make quite a big difference in that space. And there's a healthy level of crossover with the strategic priorities sitting side by side there too. Obviously, there's big opportunities in the iwi Māori space, but also a big focus around the knowledge and innovation that Selwyn could drive would be sitting in that food and fibre sector to the left there as well. So there's a healthy level of cross-pollination across all of these.
Thanks. Megan, you good with that?
Yeah. Phil. If you just go to the next slide, or actually keep on going through, it's the one that actually had that knowledge, the information hub, the innovation hub. Yeah, that's where those words are there, becoming the knowledge capital. I guess that which is a bit different to what the answer we've just been hearing. So maybe some of the terminology needs to be tied up. But I'm not speaking about anything negative about this because this is amazing. This is absolutely incredible. Thank you very much. This is absolutely the sort of thing. It's talking about, we talk about communication with our communities. We talk about, we want to hear from them. This is opening the door to our business community and saying, tell us how we can work together. You're not going to use our money, but let's work together and see how we can fund this through whatever means we can. And it's going to be, and along the way, it enables conversation with us, with council, with our values, with our partners, and everything else. So I think this is absolutely an incredible first step, Sharon and team. And I'm really excited to see how this goes forward, and really excited to actually be part of it.
Thanks, Phil. Sharon?
Unsurprisingly, I'm going to chip in again. These are all interlinked, and I guess, and Megan, you raise a really good point. We have been so involved in this for a number of months now, and working with the advisory groups. When we talk, we know what we mean because we've been party to those conversations. But you've given us a very good point of just because we know this inside out, we've got to be able to articulate it in a way that is really clear to everybody and understands the details. So that's a good point of learning. The likes of the partnerships, the partnerships with council, with Lincoln University. You know, we heard from Brad Olson earlier in the piece about, you know, what makes Selwyn Point a difference, agriculture, the tertiary partnerships, and these are areas that have not yet been fully explored. And so that sort of features into becoming the knowledge capital about how we work with universities, how we harness graduates coming out of there, and how those graduates maybe feed into logistics businesses or the dairy business. So that there's a whole stream of work that falls out of this that's got a really lovely domino effect, and sort of gives that circular economy effect if we get this right over a number of years. So, and some of these things there's some short-term wins here, but there's also, we're looking into generationally and longer term. But very much take your point that perhaps we need to give a little bit more flesh on the bones in terms of explanation.
And that's probably understanding what input you're looking for today, because there's been so much other input that's gone into this. This isn't this governance group that's had this input yet, and there might be some other things that, as we see this, we're like, that doesn't seem to quite chime or fit with some other things. So I just wonder if we just take our time and go back to the initial slides, or is there going to be another opportunity to have that part of the conversation?
I would suggest that actually we need to have a formal workshop with you. And I would suggest that bringing Johnny down for that formal workshop. So we need to slot in a time for a formal workshop. So we've taken a large contingent. If you go right back to the very slide about who we've had involved, the numbers from our business sector. So this was about going out and engaging and listening to our business from large scale to smaller. We almost need to take you through a potted version of the engagement, and the really great engagement. And these are the, you know, what's been brought to you today is the messaging that has come from our large scale business and our smaller scale business. So we need to find a way, and I'm sure Johnny will assist us with that, about giving you a potted version workshop to take you through that then brings you up to speed, so that it makes sense to you about hearing the information that has come from the participants. What I can say, and what I'm absolutely delighted with, is the level of interest. And, you know, Shane and Phil, you've been along to a number of these workshops, and the level of engagement from our business sector of all size and scale shows that there's that they are delighted that council have reached out, that they are delighted that we want to partner, that they are delighted that we are taking a strategic view. So we probably just need to do a little bit more work to now take you as councillors and representatives on that journey.
Thanks, Sharon. I think it would be good for us to do. Shane.
Kia ora, Sam. Tēnā rā tātou. Ngā mihi for the report and the work that's gone into bringing this information together, understanding that it requires a budget, and that budget sits within the LTP draft at the moment. You know, it's a good time to address that potentially now. I respect the work that's gone into this, and it's been a long time coming and should have already been in place some years ago. And as we've already discussed, revenue, the potential lack of this strategy provides pathways for investment into our district to provide more benefit, be that the 4 pillars to our communities. A couple of things stood out for me, and we've discussed legacy issues, and that can be good and that can be not good, but generations to come, and a strategy for me is a kaupapa that does support intergenerational decisions, and something like this that should already exist as part of a council, I'm happy to support, because it does provide enduring benefits through partnerships at a cost, and for a professional service to provide as a facilitator, that this council has a place in providing pathways for businesses. And on occasion we have missed opportunities because there has been no blueprint or coherency. So certainly the work that's gone into it so far does provide that. I think we've always been open for business, and this is just a way of raising that up to a more professional manner, so that the multi-billion-dollar companies that already exist here, including mana whenua, Turanga, the Frontiers and the Westlands and the Rymans and that type of thing are comfortable in their investment because we are a professional organisation to deal with, and whether that's enablement or whether that's the way that we engage. I think certainly that this starts to provide that. The feedback, I attended the first one and the last one actually, and I initially had concerns around I guess there was a cost involved in setting it all up to bring people along. So to be transparent about that, I did have initial concerns, but the last one that I attended certainly confirmed that the investment is worthwhile, and it is what is needed to provide a professional level of service. And right at the start, a comment from one of the attendees was that we have $1 billion capex program, and without enablement, we will go elsewhere. So this is supporting current businesses to continue to invest, to provide jobs for our communities and extended wellbeing. So I look forward to the further reports, and as one of the councillors responsible or involved in the economic portfolio, I commend you for your work. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Good to get that feedback on the sessions that you've attended. So we'll wrap this up there. Is there anything further you want to add? We'll wait for the next workshop, and we'll find a date for that to come back to councillors. Cool. Thank you very much. The next item is the growth model. Ben Bed, welcome back.
All right. Cool. Thanks for that. Probably just before we get into that, I thought it might help clarify some of the conversation around deprivation or affordability that was happening before. It's probably on me. Some of the information previously may have misrepresented that data, so I've been just trying to dive through that and figure out what it means, and I'll get that all fixed up later. The 36% I think we said is high deprivation is actually probably meant to say that we're more advantaged, so rather than high deprivation. So that's where I got tripped up, and so that means that we're actually better off than most other TAs in the area. So the deprivation index is built by a group out of university. It takes some of the census data and compares a bunch of things in some categories to say where we sit. So most of Selwyn sits in the above average, and most of them actually sit in the highest, the most advantaged quintile. So
thank you. Can you circulate something on that to us all?
Yeah, I can, and hopefully it won't be as confusing as I've made it out to be.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, is that, how up to date is that? Is it the 2018 one, or is there anything any sooner?
No, so it's only done on census data, so it's 2018
Okay,
census data. We have to wait for the 23 data to come out to fix it up. Yeah. Cool. So on the growth model report we've got attached to that, so we just continually update that report based on if there's changes. So the recent one was done because of the district plan review finishing, so that had an impact on some of the zonings around, and so that changed where our capacity was in terms of medium and long term. And once we've got some census data and some new household and population projections, we can start changing, putting that into the model again and going through that. Also just keep refining the process. So we've taken out a few more sites that have been identified as not developable. That was only around 100 sites or 100 capacity, as well as just refining the process to look at those high value sites that may not in fact develop because they've got a lot of other capital value invested in their property. So we're going through that. So the key number in there is we're still short in the 30 years for around about 3,000 dwellings. And so that's around 3-4 years of total growth. So that's in the year 26 years. So it's 2050-ish we'll be hitting that point. And those are largely in the Rolleston Lincoln townships. The approach to infill and intensification of the model is also a little conservative because it's not something that is happening in the area, so it's hard for us to model it and show how it is. But it could be changing recently, so we just need to pick up that data and start feeding that through. For example, the information we've got is that around 95% of growth in the medium, and then about 80-85 in the long term is still going to be standalone demand. And but what you see in other towns is that it actually starts to shift based on the mass and size of it. So we can start looking at that trend as well. The key though is how we respond to the capacity shortfall, and the main document we've got at the moment is the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan. So that has a key target, overarching direction about focusing growth through targeted intensification around the towns and the public transport corridors. And then the associated work program with that is around how we improve the feasibility and other things for that kind of development, so that in the end that feasible capacity number can start to improve. Because with the changes in the townships around the medium density zoning, that has enabled a lot of theoretical capacity, but it hasn't made it feasible. So as prices change and things change over time, that capacity could become feasible. So you don't actually have to do a planning response. It could actually be a change in those things. So the Greater Christchurch Work Program will start looking into that and come out with those processes, and then we'll start having our own strategic work out of Future Selwyn and other work programs to address that as well. That's all I was wanting to cover on that. The information is on our website under the planning section. All the assumptions are still there, and all that information is there for everyone to see. So yeah, anything?
Thanks, Ben. Can you just talk a little bit more about the process to get to those numbers? Because there was quite a lot of sort of spatial work that your team did around some site-specific work to understand how you might measure what is actually feasible and likely to occur, rather than just looking at a town and saying, 50 hectares divided by X number of capacity.
Yeah, the feasibility calculation takes into a bunch of factors. So it looks at each site in the district and asks the question of it, like what could be put on that site, and like what would the return of what would the cost of that be, and then could they sell it for, to figure that out. So each site goes through that process and figures out what the most feasible, the most profitable outcome for that specific site is, and then kind of just aggregates that up. So you'd look at the cost of the capital value and the land value, and then you divide that into the types of typologies that you could get out, and figure out how much they could potentially sell it for based on that kind of those inputs we've got. So we'll just, as we continue to try and update those inputs and figure it out. So that's how it grows from there. And so we go through and just make sure that we're not picking up commercial sites for residential development or council-owned sites, and we think we take out the church property trust sites that aren't, and some other, whatever we know of commercial happening in residential sites. Those kind of things to try and work out. So we're continually trying to find those and update that too.
Thank you. And the margin of error is the wrong sort of word, but do you think we're guessing at the top end or at the bottom end of, like, long-term projections is always going to be errors in what we're assuming? Are the numbers here likely to be conservative, or is this extrapolating out and actually we're trying to show that we will undersupply in the end?
Yeah, I think the intensification, the multi-unit and kind of infill number is probably conservative in here, because we don't have good trends to sort of suggest otherwise. So we need to do some more work to figure that out. But yeah, again, in the medium term, we're sort of saying that 95% of those households now will be doing standalone, but we could see maybe we're actually seeing some of those kind of attached typologies appearing now. So maybe that number is actually 90 or earlier on. So that if that kind of comes down, that sort of changes what type of capacity we will need, and it could start to see the shift in the current sites that we think aren't feasible now. They might start to become more feasible because that demand is shifting, the demand is changing, and so the price and points are moving there too. So I think it's probably is slightly conservative in terms of that element as well.
Yeah, I guess it's probably a question that you can't answer, but the new government is talking about rolling back some of the MDRS provisions. We have people in our communities who are wanting to take those up. How does it leave them at this time? Do they need to get their finger in the pie straight away or without delay?
Well, I think we're still waiting to see what they're actually asking us to do. They've indicated what they want, but we need to figure out what the mechanism they're asking us to follow. And then the question is back to council is what we actually do about that. Do we keep those? Do we keep all those provisions for the whole town? Do we seek to try and look at it around certain areas and where the best areas are? And then the question is, if they're asking us to do long-term 30-year zoning, like if we start to shift that number, then how else are we going to have to respond outside of that? But yeah, it's really up to what mechanism and time frame they give us to come back to you on what options we approach.
Thank you.
My question is around the 30-year long-term planning provisions. We also have, and maybe it's going to be difficult to answer, like Malcolm said, policies, national policies on highly productive land. We have a responsibility for hazardous sites. We also have a responsibility for setbacks with regards to reverse sensitivity to major industrial or commercial viability units. And we also have the land banking. And I just wonder, with regards to the planning, or looking at all of those examples, how are we sitting with regards to being able to provide that 30-year plan within our district?
Yeah, so if we were to consider additional greenfield land beyond what we've done now, all of the those issues would have to be sort of kind of put together in terms of how we decide if that's the right appropriate approach to greenfield land versus going this way or that way. So that's part of how you would assess the additional greenfield spaces. So yeah, if we get to a point where we say yes, we need to do some greenfield, then we'd have to go through and figure out where that is, and taking into account where the industrial land is, where the highly productive land is, and those things. And that's going to be a broader balancing act in terms of that. The question on land banking is something we probably don't have a good handle on. It's probably because it's not as we have developers that get stuff and want to get on with it. But we probably do need to look into it more to figure out whether the capacity we say that is there, whether it is to occur. We had done a survey on existing urban areas owners there to say whether they were thinking about doing that, and I think we'll bring that to a committee meeting later on, maybe, to discuss what the outcome of that was. But that can start for us to understand what's happening in the existing areas. Are they facing issues? Do they want to do it or not? And see how we actually have we got that land ready? As the people going to take it up? So yeah.
So just to follow on from that land banking one, are we at a risk? Because my understanding is that you'll get a request for rezoning of the land, but once the land's rezoned, then it will be cut up into parcels and it'll be on-sold to each single developer to actually develop on a timescale when it's suitable. So the whole land won't be developed all at once. Quite often it's developed in stages. And just looking at, if economic viability plays a big part in whether that land can actually be turned into housing. So just to complex the matter even further, is that something that you are also trying to assess?
Yeah, I think it's probably too hard to model per se, but I think we could probably just say this is the capacity we see happening, and then if someone could probably argue that they're not going to develop and try and use that as a way of undermining what capacity could be there. But again, we don't really have a mechanism to take away that provision. So kind of once it's once they're there ready to go, it's kind of stuck. So it is a tricky situation for us, but we can't really model it. We've just got to kind of be aware of it.
Three questions. I think the previous document that came to us, there was a lot of angst, particularly from developers, about the non-release of the model that was used to develop this. Has that been resolved, and that model, seeing SDCs paying for it, has it been released so it's transparent?
Yeah, so on their website, all of the data inputs have are available for anyone to use to make their own model, and this report, the outcome of all of the summary of all the township capacities there, as well as a spreadsheet on each site on what the capacity is there. So effectively, we've provided.
So it's been resolved. I mean, it's no longer an argument that what's included, what's in and what's out is clearly transparent, and how it's been arrived there is quite transparent. That issue that was there before is gone.
I hope so. I think we're pretty transparent about what's there, probably more so than any other council has been on what they're modelling. So
the argument last time was, I think it was on page 60, used our proprietary geospatial property model, and that wasn't disclosed. The model.
Yeah. So the model is their IP. So we don't show them. We don't have the ability to say, here's the model for you to log in and look at, but the outputs and the site-by-site spreadsheet analysis is there for people to look at, as well as all the assumptions and the inputs to there. So you could effectively just take all that and build your own if you wanted to, but yeah.
I think reflecting on that was the problem, is that they got the inputs and they didn't come out the same answers. Not surprisingly, I suppose, but second question, is this just around residential, or is it only, or is it considering industrial or commercial land?
Yeah, I think this has probably just got the residential numbers in it. We do model the commercial stuff. I don't think we've put it in a report, but we could probably look at doing that as well. Yeah. It's usually not the key issue.
Particularly about Lincoln, and I keep coming back to it, is what's happening by default. Our position as a council is, if you want commercial land or industrial land, come to Rolleston, whereas the people who need it are buying lifestyle blocks and converting lifestyle blocks between Christchurch and Taitapu into industrial units. So there's diggers, transport companies, and it's largely due to council inaction of providing land where people want to develop those services. So that's a real problem. The other thing which particularly applies, I was surprised really, was that once you get outside the main centres, good old Taitapu has the worst sufficiency in the short and long term, up to 640 in the long term. And the report says they can all go and live in Lincoln or Rolleston. It's not material. If you happen to live in Taitapu or want to live in Taitapu, it is material. And the demand figures tend to suggest there's a lot of people want to. So I guess it's a bit flippant to say it's not material and doesn't matter, when in fact there is quite a few demand and people want to live there.
Yeah, it's probably not clear, but there's probably a couple of things around what the projection for Taitapu is versus what we want it to sort of look like, or the issues that Taitapu face around flooding and that. So previously we may have said, that's growing at 5%, where actually it should be nearer 2 or 3%. And it's probably it's probably more that within that catchment, yeah, whether you're saying Taitapu or something else in a similar area could be similar. So yeah, but that will be something we have to address in our kind of strategic planning around what are we actually planning for Taitapu, what it should be,
Yes,
and
but
what
probably I'm using Taitapu as an example, but anywhere between Horswell, Taitapu and Lincoln, largely traditional farming has ceased to exist, and it's a conglomeration of large lifestyle blocks and smaller holdings, which are gradually being either built on or turned into industrial units, as Malcolm would understand from Prebbleton. I suppose it's happening by stealth rather than being planned. Last thing, and I brought this up last time, I'm sure it's wrong, page 80 in our books, it's got Waimakariri is defined as a tier 1 urban environment. That should be Selwyn, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think they just, that was in the last report as well. It'd be good if they could amend that, get it right. Thank you.
You got that, no? Yes. Great.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks, Ben, for the report, and similarly along the same lines as Councillor Miller, transparency, and you've spoken a bit about the flexibility moving forward, depending on demographics and changing landscape into the future. Are you confident that there is enough transparency for so the business community of Leaston, where they are looking to develop more business rather than move to Rolleston, say perhaps? Are you confident that there's enough transparency for them to see that and forecast that moving forward? And secondly, around attached houses in rural areas, is there scope to be flexible if, say, a builder wanted to in Leaston, for example, build affordable housing for the generations of families, local generations or Southbridge or something like that? Is there enough scope to allow flexibility or housing aspirations of mana whenua?
Yeah, so this is only looking at the township ones. It sort of takes a percentage of rural to occur there and doesn't model that. So that's, yeah, that will be however, whatever they're able to do through the district plan in that space. But yeah, these, as much confidence you can take from them as being just a projection of something, but this is what we try and work towards in our overall planning, and what we see maybe projected, we can think about what we want to see for these areas to give those towns that confidence, and investing in those businesses based on what we think people may show up for. Yeah.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. First of all, I just want to commend you for this report. So my day job is a independent hearing commissioner, so I see this type of data often. I've sat for days in hearings where experts of different economists have argued what model should be taken, to the point that we have to sometimes instruct joint witness statements so that we get one single source of truth. But this particular document was really easy to understand, and showing all of the working out and the modelling is really helpful. So I just want to commend you. Good job. I see this often, but not normally in this forum in this way. So really good. Second, the purpose of the document, my understanding it is, first of all, to make sure that we are plan enabled and we can actually make sure that we have a district plan that allows for growth in the right areas. But my question is, other than plan enabled, my understanding is that the use of the start and next is going to be for future Selwyn and that strategy. Is that right, or is it for other purposes as well?
Yeah, this is just our information that can be used across a bunch of things. So yeah, it will be used in the district plan processes, mediations, appeals. It's used in the district plan review, and yep, we've used some of this information for the LTP, informing that kind of growth in that, and we'll keep using it to inform the long-term stuff as well for the future Selwyn as well. Yeah.
No, there'll be nothing further, Ben. Thank you for the presentation today, and yeah, it's good to have the update. Councillor, that brings us to the end of the public briefing today, so we'll close this workshop and